It's a question of pulling it together and targeting it. Let me also indicate here one of the lessons of our debt restructuring that is applicable to poverty reduction, to climate change, is the issue around speed at which we do things. The G20 framework, when we took office 21 months ago, this discussion was already in train. Now we've been in office 21 months. Yes, we're very pleased that it happened yesterday. But for the countries that are coming after us, there is need to expedite the processes.
Good evening, Africa. Tonight we break into unprecedented territory, a headline so bold, so unapologetically African, that it has stunned chanceries across Europe and sent bureaucrats scrambling for explanations. You heard it right. Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim, and Zambia's newly assertive leader, President Dima, have issued a formal demand to European nations refund every single euro, pound, franc, and krona collected in visa application fees from rejected African citizens. This is not satire, this is not speculative commentary, this is the dawn of a new African posture, one that no longer tolerates humiliation in silence. For decades, our brightest minds, students, entrepreneurs, skilled professionals have paid outrageous amounts in visa fees to European embassies, only to be rejected without explanation, without dignity, and without refund. Now Africa is standing up, and this time with receipts in hand. In a joint press briefing held in Ouagadougou and simulcast in Lusaka, Captain and President Dima took the global stage by storm. The message was clear. Africa will not bankroll its own rejection. We will no longer accept the financial exploitation hidden behind diplomatic smiles and immigration rejection letters. This joint action was not impulsive, it was calculated, it was strategic, and most of all, it was deeply personal for millions of Africans who have felt the sting of visa denial not just in dignity, but in cold, hard cash. President Dima, in his fierce and eloquent address, stated, "When a European applies for an African visa and it is rejected, the fee is returned. Why is the African not afforded the same decency? Is our money invisible? Or is our humanity less valued?" Added, in a voice that has become the thunder of the Sahel, "For every euro taken from a rejected student, for every kwacha stolen from a Zambian entrepreneur, we demand accountability. We are not beggars, we are partners, and partners don't scam each other. Make no mistake, this isn't just about money. This is about respect. It's about setting new rules in an unequal world. It's about confronting the subtle financial racism embedded in Western immigration systems, and it's about daring to say, we are done being polite about injustice." Already, the European Union has called for an emergency meeting. Diplomatic cables are flying. Western media is trying to downplay the storm, but the people of Africa are not fooled. This joint demand marks a shift from complaint to confrontation, from silence to strategy. The continent's younger generation, the digital warriors and political reformers, are watching closely. This is the kind of leadership they have been begging for: bold, disruptive, unafraid. So tonight we stand witness to a historic challenge issued not with tanks or treaties, but with truth. Burkina Faso and Zambia have fired the first shot in a financial liberation campaign that could ripple across the continent. Will other African leaders join the charge? Will we finally unify against a system that profits from our rejection? Or will this moment pass, diluted by diplomacy and fear? That is the question facing Africa tonight. But for now, one thing is certain: the age of silent submission is over, the era of African dignity has begun, and Europe is being held to account. Stay with us as we unpack this revolutionary demand, the global reactions, and what this means for every African who has ever stood in line at a foreign embassy only to be told no. After they've paid, this is just the beginning, and this is Africa Rising.
Welcome to Talk of Africa 360, your source for insightful news, analysis, and thoughtful commentary. If you value informed perspectives and fact-based reporting, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is based on reliable public sources and credible online information. It is intended strictly for educational and analytical purposes. We do not promote or endorse political violence, hate speech, or any form of discrimination. Our goal is to inform, not to inflame. Thanks for being here. Let's stay informed together.
It's a question of pulling it together and targeting it. Let me also indicate here one of the lessons of our debt restructuring that is applicable to poverty reduction, to climate change, is the issue around speed at which we do things. G20 framework, when we took office 21 months ago, this discussion was already in train. Now we've been in office 21 months. Yes, we're very pleased that it happened yesterday. But for the countries that are coming after us, there is need to expedite the processes. Just that, whether it's, if you like, energy transition, as Senegal is involved in that, we must just be conscious of time. Every day we don't deliver these things that are within our control, we are basically increasing the cost and the damage gets compounded. I think it's very important. The next lesson I want to suggest here, relevant to the subject on the table, is that German Chancellor's point yesterday at dinner, repeated today, is so important for us as a global community to mobilize resources, yes, but these resources must be invested to help grow the economies of the less developed countries. Very important, because by doing that, we are creating capacity in those economies to mitigate against climate change and obviously poverty reduction. So value addition, not just with the electric vehicle industry that is coming through, huge industry. It is important, President Macron, that we look at deliberately investing in extraction, critical minerals, for example, in value adding these minerals in country. Obviously, that will help the growth side of the GDP, create jobs, business opportunities for the transactional chain in there, if I may call it that. So I think this must be deliberate as well. Rather than generic discussions, we must dive deep into the envelope and begin to say, these are requirements, these are needs, these are minimums. And it will mutually benefit, as somebody said yesterday, not to polarize the conversation, the North and the South. It will definitely, if it's structured properly, benefit the North, the South. And that's not the debate we must be engaging in, but mutuality for greater good, for a safe world, for a world that we can pass on to the next generation in a responsible manner. Lastly, I simply want to indicate that I like the spirit of partnership that I hear. I like what I hear from leaders, all of you who have spoken. I think that's the way it should be. But the thing is now to pull all this in one basket, draw an action plan, which is time-bound, and we get the job done. If the political leadership is there, business leadership is there, decisions are clear, we now need to get our technical people not to sit on the work that needs to be done. So supervision, monitoring is important. Lastly, and this is the last one really, I want to thank what I hear from the Chinese Premier, what I hear from Secretary Yellen, and indeed all the leaders that have spoken on the issue of conflict. We cannot achieve what we want to achieve if we allow our global community to focus time, resources, everything, technology, on conflict. I think there's a duty for us all to keep our individual countries peaceful, out of conflict, and not export instability to other countries, neighboring or far away. As we now know, instability anywhere is instability everywhere. I think it's very important that we work on that issue and focus the resources, focus the time, and all the other capital provisions on the development agenda to mitigate climate change, to reduce poverty. And I must also indicate here, the cost of capital must sit in this basket, that it must be lowered. The inequity around the cost of capital, Africa, for example, pays the highest cost of capital, is not correct. It doesn't help anybody at all. It just worsens the situation. We must address this situation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, viewers across Africa and the diaspora. Tonight, we bring you a story that is shaking diplomatic tables across Europe and energizing millions of Africans around the globe. A bold and historic demand has been issued from the heart of Africa to the capitals of Europe. President Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso and President Hakainde Hichilema of Zambia have jointly called on European nations to refund visa application fees to Africans whose visa requests are rejected. A thunderous statement that has reignited discussions about dignity, reciprocity, and the need to decolonize global travel systems. In a joint press briefing held in Ouagadougou, both African leaders stood side by side, not just as heads of state, but as representatives of a long-silenced and disrespected continent. Their message was clear, firm, and unapologetic. It is time for fairness, it is time for justice, and it is time for the world to treat Africa with respect. The visa fee injustice. Many of these applicants are denied. But what's worse, the hefty application fees, ranging from $100 to over $300, are non-refundable. If you cannot approve our visas, the least you can do is refund our money. Imagine paying to be humiliated, to be rejected, and to have your passport stamped with denial. When a businesswoman loses her hard-earned money for a trip she's not allowed to take, that is robbery masked as policy. Hashtags like hashtag Visa Refund Now and hashtag Africa Demands Respect trended on X and TikTok. That is nearly $70 million loss to a system that denies access while profiting from rejection. It's about telling a new African generation that their worth is not tied to foreign approval. Influential Pan-African thinkers, artists, and former diplomats applauded the move, calling it a long-overdue act of resistance. Yet no explanation was offered for the lack of refunds. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Africans apply for visas to Europe for education, work, tourism, and conferences. President Traore stated, "When an African student pays for a visa and is rejected without cause, that is theft." His Zambian counterpart echoed this sentiment. "We are demanding equity." Traore and Hichilema are sending a message. Africa will no longer bow politely while being extorted. We will stand up. We will speak up. If you can't refund our people, we will take measures. And next time, it will not just be about visas. From rejecting foreign military bases to pushing for a new Pan-African currency and passport, African leaders are beginning to challenge the unspoken rules of global governance. Africa is not a charity case. We are equal members of this global community. These are not mere grievances. They are calls for reform. The current system, rooted in colonial-era arrogance, assumes that Africans should pay to request permission to visit their former colonizers and be punished financially if deemed unworthy. That era, these presidents say, is over. An avalanche of support. AU Commission members have proposed forming a Continental Visa Policy Review Committee, tasked with examining unfair practices and proposing a common African stance. Within hours of their joint statement, social media across Africa erupted with support. Economic analysts noted that in 2023 alone, Sub-Saharan Africa spent nearly $150 million in visa fees to Schengen countries, with a rejection rate close to 45% in some cases. Each time, I lost $120. This is modern robbery. But this is not just about money. It's about dignity. European response, shock and scramble. The European response was swift and somewhat defensive. A representative of the European Union issued a cautious statement expressing concern, claiming that visa processes are transparent and legal. The leaders are listening, and the system must change. Some European governments have gone on the defensive, arguing that administrative processes require resources. But President Traore fired back in a follow-up interview. "But we will not allow them to be disrespected in the process. Either refund our people or expect consequences. We are not asking for charity." Diplomatic channels are now flooded with inquiries, with Burkina Faso and Zambia preparing a joint dossier to be presented at the African Union and the United Nations General Assembly. Shifting the power dynamic, this demand comes as part of a broader wave of African self-determination. The call for visa fee refunds is more than a bureaucratic issue. It is symbolic of the larger fight against systemic inequality. What could this mean? If successful, this initiative could lead to a full review of global visa application policies, greater transparency in rejection criteria, financial accountability, and embassy operations. The rise of reciprocal visa treatment, where African nations match the visa policies of foreign governments, but more than that, It marks a shift in African diplomacy, from passive requests to firm demands. A continental wave following the announcement, countries like Ghana, Kenya, Senegal, and South Africa have expressed interest in supporting this call. At a recent Pan-African Youth Summit in Kigali, young professionals and students expressed overwhelming approval. Finally, someone is speaking for us. I was rejected 3 times for a study visa in France. Why should we pay to be insulted? The sentiment is clear. The people are tired. Final words from the leaders in concluding their joint address. The 2 presidents offered a unified vision. We want our people to dream big, to travel, to explore. A bold stance. A just demand. A new chapter. Stay tuned as this movement grows, as the African Union weighs in, and as nations across the continent unite to rewrite the rules of global engagement. Because one thing is now clear, Africa is no longer asking. Africa is demanding. Thank you.
As reactions continue to pour in from across the continent, one thing is clear. Africa is demanding respect, sovereignty, and accountability. Was this just a diplomatic misstep or a deeper sign of shifting global alliances? We'll be watching closely. If you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, unfiltered African news. This is Talk of Africa 360, telling the stories that matter.